introduction to web app pen testing and some common overview of that, as well as how to basically use Burp Suite as a tool during your web assessments that you perform. So the agenda we're going to cover today basically is I'm going to go over who I am, just briefly, quickly. I don't have a huge ego. And then we're going to basically kind of go into a little bit about web app pen testing and some common vulnerabilities you'll see on most assessments. Then we'll kind of get into Burp Suite. We'll talk about the automated testing, the manual testing portion of it, other features that are good about Burp Suite's framework. And then we'll also go into a manual testing example so that way you can take everything that I'm talking about and apply it when you're looking at different web applications. Finally, we'll wrap up with a little bit of little tips and tricks, other tools you can use outside of Burp Suite during web application testing, and some useful resources to take with you, as well as a conclusion. So full disclosure, I am not responsible for anything you learn here if you try and do it on a production environment. So if you take this and you start spidering things and you start pen testing things that you do not have permission to do, it is not my fault. I highly suggest you always have permission and you set up a rules of engagement with any customer you have. And you also can take any of this stuff and do it in a lab environment with a virtual machine. So totally take that for what it's worth. What I'm also going to say is I'm going to cover a lot of things today, but they're kind of just foundational things about Burp Suite to get you started. I'm not going to teach you exactly everything, so if I miss something, or if you have a question, please let me know. I also have 2 other guys from Breakpoint Labs here who do pen testing work just like me, and we'll try to answer any question you have. And I promise I won't put you to sleep. At least I'll try not to. So no death by PowerPoint tonight. All right, so an overview. Basically, what I'm going to share with you the bread and butter tool of every web assessment. This is basically Burp Suite. Burp Suite, I leverage it on every web assessment from start to finish. And I'd like to basically say it is one of the foundation tools. I use it not only for its manual testing and proxy capabilities, but also for its automated features with the Burp Suite Pro. Burp also has a free version, so you could actually take this right now and you could download the jar file. It won't have all of its capabilities, and I'll kind of cover which ones it doesn't have. But the paid-for version is not that expensive compared to a lot of other commercial tools you leverage. It's only $349, and it's for an annual basis, and you can actually have several different people use it at the same time. Other quick note, before we kind of dive into other things, 2 common terms are commonly here with web app assessments. You're going to hear static content and dynamic content. What that basically means is static is your flat files, your files that are just giving you news, information. They're kind of like blogs, but they don't even let you leave comments. So that's a static file. We're not going to find much with those. There's a lot of vulnerabilities in the dynamic content. That's what we're interested in. Those are the content management systems. Those are the ones that allow us to make comments. They allow us to log in, our banks. They're the ones that allow us to also send emails on behalf of the web application. So those are the juicy, fun ones that we're actually going to really get into. So with every web assessment that you have, you always want to have a methodology, a rhyme and reason behind it. With that, there's tons of them out there that you can follow. Here's 3 examples right here. There's the Pen Testing Execution Standard. There's the OWASP Testing Guide. And there's also the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. And it even has a task checklist. So you could run through this checklist to basically make sure you don't miss a step. So if you're starting out, even I still use it today, it's a really good guideline. And I'm not saying you have to go off these concrete examples. You can marry them. You can take little bits and pieces from different things that you like and make your own custom methodology. And with every great methodology in any assessment, whether it's internal, external assessments, you always want to have not only automated scanners and the automated tools run, but you want to do the manual testing as well to validate your findings and go further beyond these automated tools. So some common web vulnerabilities. I'm going to go over the 8 biggest common ones you're going to see. You got your cross-site scripting. XSS for short. Basically, this is when an attacker embeds a script into the page and it's executed within your browser. Whether it's stored XSS, and that is stored into the application, every time you visit it, it runs, or you have it just run in the browser for that one user you send it to, and that's reflected. Directory traversal is when an attacker can gain unauthorized access to restricted directories or resources because they're breaking out of the web root directory. They're basically doing the .. / They're trying to go after a directory or resource of interest, and then it comes out to your browser and tells you, you can basically just see this file. Cross-site request forgery, cross-site request forgery, this can be a little confusing. For the longest time, it's confusing to me. So if I don't get it to you, it's okay. Say you're logged into your bank, right? And you got a tab open with your bank and you're still logged in. Then you go to your email, it's in another tab in the same browser, and you get a message from a friend. And your friend's evil, and he's mean, he's trying to play a trick on you. And your friend sends you this crafted link, just like this, to your bank site. And he is sending $500 to his account with this crafted link, but you don't know it because it's been shortened. You click the link, you're logged into your bank, because it's in your same browser, it's writing your session, and it's actually doing an action on your behalf. Because it's taking your current session in the browser and then sending money to his account. That's cross-site request forgery. And the ways we prevent that is we do serialized tokens, we do different things like that, that kind of make it harder to make anything predictable. Open redirect vulnerabilities, these are just simple. Let's say, for example, you allow redirects to a partner site on your website, but you don't whitelist or blacklist it. And I just send a crafted link to a malicious site that's hosting malware. And I basically take the credibility of your site down and I say, you don't have any blacklisting or whitelist approach, so I'm going to send it to anybody I want. Other one, SQL injection. This is where you see the application's making requests. It's actually grabbing data from a database, or you're able to do searches. With that, you're basically you're able to insert SQL statements and into a parameter's value and have it execute. And sometimes you can get back a lot more data. Sometimes you can have it, you can add things to the database. Sometimes you can delete things from the database. So it's really interesting. Brute force attacks, this is the trial and error method to basically where you just try and knock on the door of the application until you get credentials right. There's a lot of ways of doing this, and we're going to cover a really good example today about it. But sometimes it's a username, password, PIN, whatever it is, that's what they try to go after. Then there's, lastly, RFI, LFI. Remote file inclusion. This is when you have the ability to basically make a request and grab a file from your bad server. So say we have a listener, and we have a bad backdoor listener, and we can basically send a request from the vulnerable site to our listener, and it grabs our file, and then it uploads it. We have it. So we have a backdoor now on their site. And then there's local file inclusion. This is kind of very similar to the directory traversal, where you can basically make a request. You can make a request to any resource or directory on the server that's located on the web application server, and you can have it output to your browser. So, this is a web application testing procedure. This is the one that basically most people kind of do, but this is also the one that I follow. You've got your scoping. This is when you establish your rules of engagement. You get your questionnaires down. You get happy with the customer. And you get an idea of what they want and what you can't do and what you can do. Because you don't want to just assume, because if you do something that pisses them off, it's game over. Then you got your recon and mapping. This is where you're going to do a lot of your open source intelligence gathering. You're going to be using your Shodan. You're going to be using your census, your Nmap. You're going to be doing a lot of Google Foo, as people call it. But with Burp, you're going to be doing a lot of spidering. Then we got automated testing. This is when you scan all the things, as everyone says, run the automated tools. And that's a huge portion of it, but it's just a foundation. Then we have manual testing. This is where we're going to go from our automated tools. We're going to validate these findings. And we're also going to try and go further and see if we can push beyond the boundaries of these findings and also reduce false positives at the same time. Finally, the money maker. What the managers pay you the big bucks for, right? The reporting. Essentially put all your hard work and everything you did into a document and then explain it as best you can with remediation. What is that?
Zach, might take you down, pull down the shade there behind you. Might help.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And then finally, one other option you have is you can basically offer remediation and review. It's not always something a customer will want. Sometimes once you give them the report, everything's done. But it's also nice to offer this to them and say, did you actually fix it? Let me retry what I did during the assessment to make sure that you actually did this and applied it. Burp Suite Overview. So now we're going to actually get into Burp Suite. This is Burp Suite's modules, basically in its framework. It's mostly known for its interception proxy, but what we're going to cover today is a little bit of everything. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into certain modules more than others. But the ones I have highlighted in orange, you'll notice, those are specific usually to the Pro version. So if you want the automated scanning capability in Burp, you have to have the Pro version. I know it stinks, but that's how they make their money. Another way is the extender. And the extender has some in the free version that you can add on. They're basically third-party modules. If anybody ever runs a WordPress site, everybody loves WordPress for all of its crazy plugins. They give you usability. Well, think of it the same way with Burp, and it calls it the B App Store, the Burp App Store. And basically, it has a lot of different features that you can incorporate other tools, and you can expand upon Burp Suite as a framework and make it a one-stop shop. So, Extender has some Pro, ones only with the Pro, and then some for free. But take it for what's worth. I'm going to dive into all these different things. So let's begin. All right. Let's get our hands dirty and let's talk about Burp and how to actually, from start to finish, use it. So launching Burp. You download the jar file, you go to PortSwigger's website, and so you get the free version. If you have it on Windows, once you have it, you can simply just double click it and it'll launch. But if you want to allocate memory to it, open up a terminal. What you're going to do is, it's a jar file. So you're going to do Java -jar capital X, lowercase m, lowercase x, and then you're just going to give it an amount of memory you want it to have. So let's just say 1 gig. You can do 2 gigs. Usually that's what's recommended by most people. But I just said 1 gig in the example. And then you're going to have the name of the jar file. And generally, most of the time, it's going to be Burp Suite _ version, and it's going to have a version number because they like to know when you have a certain version. And full disclosure too, I have these slides up on SlideShare, and I also recorded this last night, kind of a rough, dry demo of this. So if you want to check it out later, you can. Going on. Once you launch it, you're going to see that orange screen pop up too, by the way. It's just basically loading up Burp. So the biggest feature of Burp, pretty much the staple point, is its proxy. And does anyone here, does everyone know what a proxy is or not know what a proxy is? Kind of like mixed bag, I imagine. Basically, a proxy is a man in the middle, if you want to think of it. It's basically to intercept your requests and responses. And think of it this way. You go to a site, you launch it, you have Chrome up, you go to Google. Once you have Burp talking to your browser, Burp's going to grab your requests. It's going to show you the behind-the-scenes magic of what you're requesting in Google to go to Google, and it's going to capture it and intercept it. And it's not going to let it go to the server that Google's hosted at until you hit forward. Likewise, you can also enable an option bit with the proxy to have it do the same and capture the response back from Google before it even hits your browser. So it's just going to keep spinning that wheel. And you're going to be like, why is this not loading? You're going to be driven nuts, but it's just that's how it works until you forward it on. So that's kind of the way a proxy works. It's basically something that runs on your local host, and it's basically just before you reach out to the internet, it's going to capture that request. So setting up your browser. I like Firefox personally because I like all the plugins Firefox has. I also like Chrome. Either way, you can't go wrong. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click the 3 bars up here. And that's usually your options. Then you're going to want to go to Advanced in Firefox. And from there, there's also behind this pop-up, there's a networking tab. And networking, you go to Settings. Then you have this. And this is how you're going to get Burp to talk to your browser, on the browser's end. You're going to go to Manual Proxy Configuration. You're going to put your loopback address, 127.0.0.1. By default, Burp runs on 8080. Now you can define any port you want, but for the simplicity of this demo and the default port that Burp runs on, it's just 8080. We have that all set up. We're basically going to click OK, and then voila, we should have our Firefox browser configured to talk to Burp. to double check this, now that Burp's loaded, that orange screen is gone, we're going to see all those crazy tabs. And it's like, oh my God, where do I even start? Well, where you start is by making sure that it's talking to your browser. By default, there's a proxy tab, and these are all the modules like we discussed before. I didn't explain them yet, but I showed you them earlier. We're going to go to the proxy tab, and then there's a sub-tab called Options. The Options tab will basically have the loopback address it should in 8080. Also, make sure that you have this checkbox enabled. Sometimes you'll have the configuration, but you just won't have the checkbox enabled. And it's like, why is it not communicating? Why am I not intercepting these requests? Always make sure that these two things are right, and make sure the port is right with the browser configuration. You can add, edit a rule, or remove it too, so just keep that in mind. So common issue. Once you send your request to Google, a lot of times you're like, all right, how do I forward it along? Or why is it not going? And it's just spinning, it's spinning. You're like, oh my God, you forget. So you're not going to get the little Microsoft Mailcoat guy to help you out. It's not going to happen this time, even though some people hate them, some people love them. If you see your proxy tab light up, that means you have something in there. There's something waiting in the queue. Basically, you intercepted something. So check it out. Go to your proxy tab. From there, I always like to do this once you have your rules of engagement, or like even if you're doing this in a lab environment. Let's say, for example, you set up a VM, you're going against Multitude or broken WebGoat or something like that, and you have your just a local address. You want to define that so you can block out all the other noise of everything else. Just really focus in on the one thing in scope. So you're going to go to your target tab, scope, and you're going to basically add a rule. So what you're going to do is you're going to add the scope here, and you're going to put the IP or domain, whatever it is, and then you can leave the protocol as any, and I usually don't define the port either, unless you're really kind of like at the risk, like you're only allowed to like touch, HTTP 80 or 80. If they don't want you to touch 443, then you just define the port. But if you want it to capture and figure out if there's other ports and services open, leave it open. Then click OK, and then we have our scope defined. So that way we can go to our next thing, which is our sitemap. Our sitemap will be the next slide, sorry. What we want to do after we have the scope, we're basically going to start to look at the application. When we look at the application, we're going to start to try and figure out, we're going to be basically mapping our app. We're going to be clicking through it. And as silly as it sounds, just like you do browse any web application in your browser, you want to do the same thing. But you want to do it with an attacker's mindset. You want to click through it, and you want to figure out what is the purpose of this scoped app that I'm looking at. Is it a bank? Is it a blog? Is it just a virtual machine? Whatever you want to do. What are the features it allows? Can I log in? Can I send an email on behalf of the application? Can I make a comment? Can I find other users of this application, even not authenticated? Can you sign in? View the source. A lot of times, developers will think, no one's ever going to view my client-side source code. Okay, well, if you're a web app, hacker, you're going to basically view the source code, because sometimes they leave little Easter eggs for you, and they leave little comments and things like that. It's, it is what it is. So view the source. You just simply right-click on any page, view source, and at first you're like, oh my God, this looks like crap. If you don't want to do this stuff, and then eventually you start to look for certain things. And you can even do a control find and start to look for certain things that you know are good to look for. Observe the file and directory structure. So in the URL run line, start to look at what are the directories that are being built out? What are the resources being built out? What are the file extensions? Is this a PHP app? Is this an ASP.NET? What is it? So we kind of got to figure out what's being in use. What are the technologies? Big time. This is huge. I love this app. I love this plugin. With Firefox and Chrome, you can add on something called Wappalyzer. This is a free little plugin. Every time you go to a site, it tells you in the run line, has little icons, and tells you what tech stack is running the site, as well as any version information it can find as well. So let's say, for example, you go to Yahoo, and then you find out, well, Yahoo's actually running on top of Drupal. You know what I mean? So you can start to figure out, what am I up against here? Because that's the real thing. These content management systems, a lot of them have a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of things, and once you kind of know what you're up against, you can go further. When information is being displayed to you, can I control any of it? And Can I also interact with the database? Can I make queries? Can I send things? Kind of see if it seems like it's making server-side requests in the back end. It's kind of hard sometimes, but sometimes you can find out. So you're mapping your app, clicking through it, and what you're doing now too, while this is all going on, you want to make sure that you go to that proxy tab and intercept mode was on. So every time we want to send, we're clicking through, we don't have to want to forward the request. You can turn your intercept mode off. And because we're browsing the site, it's going to be still populating all the things we clicked through. And it's going to go to a tab called HTTP history, which I'll cover as well. So Spider. Now we've clicked through it, let's try and find more linked content, but in an automated fashion. What we're going to do, since we have our scope, as we see right now, target sitemap, and we click through a couple things, got a couple different directories, we're building our hierarchy. You see here, this is gray, it's kind of hard to see, this one's black. The gray means it hasn't made a request to it yet, but it's seen it, and it knows it's somewhere embedded in like an anchor tag or an href. The black means it has requested, so it has been there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run this automated Spider feature. We're going to right-click, and pretty much everything in Burp, so right-click away. Really nice. We're going to right-click on there, go to Spider host. From there, we're basically looking for linked content. It's going to start building out our sitemap even further. So building your sitemap. See, now we're starting to get a lot more information. We're starting to see directories and resources and subdirectories. We're starting to get an idea of what we're up against here. You know, what is the structure of the web application and scope? And what we're looking for is basically a representation of the content and the URLs that are all linked and embedded into the pages. And then we're going to look at the files and the parameters that are being passed as well if we can. So when you run your Spider, this is what it looks like. There's a Spider tab you'll see in the framework, and you just simply click that, and there's a Spider status. And it'll tell you the Spider is running. The Spider running tells you how many requests it's made, tells you how many bytes it's transferred, and also tell you how many are in the queue. Until this number hits 0, Spider is not done. But sometimes, if you have such a huge app you're up against, and you didn't allocate enough memory, it can crash Burp, because the Spider is just overwhelmed. So keep that in mind too. Also, we have this set here, and I think by default it pretty much is set, but because we define our scope, it's only going to Spider what we assigned as the scope. If we don't have that enabled, we could be Spidering other stuff. And we could be going off in different directions, and we're just wasting our time, and we're potentially breaking our rules of engagement. So it's good to define your scope. Turn that off, all you simply do is click the Spider's running, and it'll turn the Spider off too, by the way. And then once the Spider's done running, it's just done. So, we have that, we built out a sitemap now, the Spider's done. Another cool feature with Burp, in between the sitemap target, and now we have our hierarchy behind this box, we click this filter button. And filter, think of it as like your grep awk cut utility, if you're a Linux guy, but inside of Burp. So we can say, show me only the scope items. You know, you can do a search for certain terms. That's only in the pro version, sorry. But these are all still here. So you could just basically say, I only want to see the successful status code responses. I only want to see my 200 OKs that came out. Or you could say, I want to see all the internal server errors. I want to see those messages, those dirty error messages. There's something went wrong. You can also go for like certain file extensions. There's all types of different features. So feel free to play around. The filter's really nice, and then it'll basically reduce or increase the sitemap. But usually it reduces it because you're trying to narrow in on something. So it'll basically reduce your sitemap and only show you those things you want to see. Now filtering can lead to a lot of cool things too. It can lead you to some client-side comments. Those Easter eggs I talked about. From the developer, sometimes the developer will leave comments in there. And he'll leave maybe guest accounts and things like that in the features. Sometimes you'll find email addresses. Email addresses can be usernames. Keep that in mind. Always take down email addresses as you're doing these assessments. Internal path disclosure. Sometimes you'll find out internal paths behind the web app, behind the scenes that are running on the server, and it's just unneeded. It's information disclosure. Unlinked files and paths. Sometimes you'll find certain things that are not linked content, but they're mentioned in the client-side code because you're filtering. Like I said, potential username, passwords, it's not really likely, but the emails is a lot of times. And technology enumeration too. A lot of times when you do filtering, you could just say, hey, I want to look for this meta tag for Drupal. You just do a keyword search for Drupal, and then it'll look throughout every single page in your sitemap to see if you've got any hits for Drupal. So that's nice. And it can double check your WAPalizer too. Another little feature too, this is nice. If you can do it, basically you have your analyze your target. And this, anything in the engagement tools section is going to basically be in the pro version only. So this is only in the paid for version. But the analyze target, we go to the next slide here, it'll basically give you a breakdown of all the static and dynamic content that has been collected so far in your sitemap. It'll also kind of give you a breakdown of parameters as well. So you see here, we've got a couple different tabs in the Analyze. We've got our summary, which just gives us a high-level overview. We've got our dynamic, and then it'll basically give us a listing of all the ones that have parameters, accept user input. Those are the ones we actually really want to dive into. And it's got your static ones that just give you mostly information, things like that. A lot of image files, things of that nature. And then we have the parameters. And we also see it said there's 187 parameters being passed in this application and allow user input or user interaction. But 98 of them are unique. So that means that they're not doubled. So you can kind of get an idea of what you're up against. And this is really good when you're trying to figure out your scope. You're trying to figure out your timeline, how long this is going to really take. And there's a review right there, like I said, of static and dynamic. I think dynamic is good. It's interacting with a back-end or server-side request. Client is just flat files, just give you a lot of information usually for static. HTTP history. So we had our intercept mode turned off, right? Now it's been capturing all those click-throughs that we did. And we were mapping our app, we're trying to figure it out. Go to the proxy tab, history. It's actually good. It's captured everything that we've done. We've looked at, and it's there. So if you ever want to go back and say, man, that one resource was really interesting, but I'm going to check it out later, you can simply click, make a comment on that exact resource, or you can even color code some of them too. And you can say, I want to check this out further. So keep that in mind too. This HTTP history will be capturing a lot of information. You can also go to the options tab and tell where you want it to capture things. You can even say, like, I want it to capture all my requests of my scanner. I want it to capture my spider requests. Then it can kind of get really convoluted and things of that nature. So I just kind of usually like to keep it at its default. And then you can also click any of these tabs, and it'll kind of, if you want to see the most recent request, the 100th request, you can bring that to the top, rather than see your first request that you made, which was just connected to the server. So a lot of different things, all these different sub-tabs there. You can double click on them, and it'll kind of reorganize all the structure. All right, so the reason why I have this background, I'm getting married this summer, right? And I'm excited because I'm going on a honeymoon to Moria and Bora Bora. So I want to share my excitement with you. So every time I have a transition, I'm going to have a really cool picture of where I'm going. So be jealous, right? Automated testing. Let's get into automated testing. Automated testing. It will miss stuff. This is inevitable. It's not the end-all be-all. It's the foundation of what we do as security professionals. We run automated tools, we run scanners, and according to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, in a recent report last year, they said 67% of high-impact vulnerabilities actually required manual testing, which means it wasn't in an automated check or a signature. They actually had to push further beyond the tool to find the vulnerability. So that's a really cool, interesting fact, and I always like that. I love to show managers that. I really do. Automated testing can break stuff. We all know this. It happens. It's inevitable. I've seen many times where I've overloaded a server, and you need to track it and watch these automated tools because really, at any moment, they could possibly cause a denial of service. So keep an eye on that. It can break things. It can also cause an influx in, when you're fuzzing an application and you're sending a bunch of payloads at it, it could be storing them on the web applications. Keep an eye on that. Automated testing can take a long time. It's hard because we don't know, unless we know how many links is actually on the site, and we also don't know what we know the tech stack and things like that, we can kind of start to figure out how long we think the automated tool will run. Some tools take longer than others. So keep that in mind too as you start to figure this out with your web assessments. I personally have used WebInspect, Acunetics, Burp, a lot of open source tools, and some of them take longer than others. So keep that in mind. automated tools will have false positives. But they pay us the big bucks in the report to get rid of all the false positives, right? So we need to go through all these findings and find additional findings on top of that. And the best way to do that and to double check these things is to right click and send to repeater, which we're going to cover in a little bit, but I'm going to show you the automated scanner tool, and we're going to cover that now. So Burp's automated scanner, once you want to send something to the scanner, you would go to the sitemap tab. You would right click and you would basically say from the top domain or IP, send to automated scanner. And it's going to bring up this pop-up. And it's basically a scanning wizard. And it's really nice because it's just a simple click-through, walk-through of how you want your scanner to run. It'll tell you, you have option bits where you can say, remove all items with no parameters. That basically saying, remove static content. I don't want to scan that. It's a waste of time. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's up to you. You can also say, remove items with the following file extensions. You could say, remove all the image files. I don't really want to scan those. It just bogs down my testing. And then once you're all happy with everything here, you can also see how many items are going to be in your scan queue. How many things you're actually going to scan, how many links, how many items. So once we've done that, we're happy. We click next. We go through the automated scan wizard, and we're off to the races. We're running it. You see the scanner starts to show us some color here. We start to see results are populating. We can look at our scan queue. Right here in this example, it looks like there's about 10 to 15 threads running right now. And we can define these threads. We can make them less. We can make them more. But you'll see as it's running here, it tells you what directories or resources it's requesting and going against and trying to do an automated scan against. And what we're seeing is that this is done. It told you how many requests it did. And it also tells you issues. And issues, if it has anything in gray, it means informational findings. If it has anything in yellow, low, orange, medium, and red, high severity. So if it found anything with high severity, that'll overgo whatever the bottom one is. So if like this one found, a high severity finding, it would get rid of the gray and make like 3 findings, and it would say red over top. But it tells you the completion rate's really nice, and you just kind of let this run in the background. So you kind of let this just do its thing, but you also just want to keep an eye on it as well, because sometimes for some applications, even Burp Scanner can take it down. So once we have that, all our results. This is an older version of Burp, so they actually move the scan results. There used to be a scanner tab, and you would have to view it there. But nowadays, with the new jar files of Burp, you actually go to Target, and in your sitemap, it's just going to have these results here with your sitemap. So you're not going to have the extra tab, I don't believe, with the newer versions of Burp. So, but you can still see certain resources and directories that we have these severity findings. We've got some reds, we've got some yellows, some grays, whatever. We can start to go into them further and see, are these actually legitimate? Can we actually request this? And we're actually going to test this and make sure that these findings are legitimate as well. We're going to send them to Burp's repeater. Before we do that, I usually like to say when the scan is done, let's just save off the report. Burp has a nice report feature with its scanner. So you would right-click on the sitemap again at the top on your IP or domain, and you're going to say, go to issues when you right-click, and you're going to say report issues for this host. Brings up another wizard. This wizard says, which format do you want for your report? You want it to be an HTML so you can open it in your browser? Do you want an XML so maybe you can throw it in another tool? Whatever you want to do. From there, it also has other things. Do you want me to be very verbose with my information? Do you want me, you can uncheck these boxes and only show certain things for high level. It depends how much detail you want. And this is basically going to give you your report. And I'll show you a little sample of Burp's report. This is Burp's, first thing you see when you open it. It's basically just giving you a scan report. And it'll tell you, here's its severity table. It'll tell you the confidence it has in the finding. So is it firm? Is it certain? How many high findings it found. Tell you how many mediums it found, how many lows, informationals. And then from there on, it's going to basically rank it from severity. It's going to show all the high ones first and then go all the way down to information. And it's going to show you the request, the response, to basically prove that it found the finding. And it's going to give you a little bit of a finding issue detail. So why is this bad? What should I do? And a common remediation to fix the problem. So Burp can give you those little bits of information. Manual testing. All right. So this is why you need us. You can't just need a tool. You need somebody to validate this. You need someone to push further. So let's cover some manual testing. So some things to think about when you enter in your manual testing phase. You run your automated scanner, you found linked content, you spidered things. You've done all that. Now you want to push further. Because a lot of people at this point, they're like, all right, I've spidered it, ran the scanner, I'm done. Well, you're not. Push further. Let's say what technology you use. We already kind of had that mindset before. Let's make sure we properly map the application. Now you think you're done mapping, but you're not. There's unlinked content. Tons of it. Generally, always tons of unlinked content. So we're going to get into that. It's a lot of fun. Because you'll find a lot of cool things, a lot of new vulnerabilities. Enumerate all the technology features. Do we find out that all the features of the app? Maybe sometimes if we actually get credentials to an application, we then have the ability to do a file upload as a user. Or we have the ability to make a comment that we weren't able to prior. Enumerate all the injection point areas, the parameters, and their values. Can you figure out what is being done with your input? So from there, you want to go, all right, when I type in name equals Bob, is Bob coming back to me on the screen? Maybe if it is, we can do some cross-site scripting. Maybe we can inject some, some script, embed some code. Is my data being called upon in a database? We can start to try and do some SQL injection. We can try and do some command. Does your input generate an action? So let's say, can I send an email on behalf of the application and change the from line? Do some server-side request forgery and basically, on behalf of the application, send a bad email, spoof email. Let's say, does your input call back? So can you request a file on the server you're not supposed to and have it output to your browser? Can you have it request a file to a server you have listening for a backdoor? Those are the LFI, the RFIs. And can you end up putting your file in the system? That could be through the RFI or through a file upload. You can try and upload a backdoor. Let's try. Take OWASP Top 10 also when you're doing this, and that's a great resource. OWASP is huge. Open source, web application security forum, it's great. And they basically have a top 10. Here's a snapshot of the OWASP Top 10. A lot of the things I covered before with the common vulnerabilities, the 8 different ones I covered, are either listed here or they fall under one of these domains. And there's also a lot of other different vulnerabilities. And you can go to their website and drill in further and kind of get an idea of what's really the high-risk things. And they changed this, and they updated it as well. So we had our scan results, right? But we want to test them, and we want to make sure they're legitimate. So what we're going to do, we're going to find, let's say, for example, the file path traversal vulnerability file. We're going to take that, and we're going to say, all right, show me the request. This is the request here. Raw HTTP request. And even highlighted there, the payload with the directory traversal. It was trying to get to the Windows Win INI. We're going to send this to repeater, and basically what we're going to do from here is we're going to try and see, is this legitimate based off of the response? And do we actually get anything back? Do we actually get a directory traversal to that resource that had it output this? So repeater's purpose is to test, modify the request, and repeat. Name the tool. So what we would do is you can go to the raw, you can see the parameters tab too. These are all the different types of parameters. You got some cookies, you got some ones in the URL, you got ones in the body, which these are probably for get requests, these are for post. You basically can see here, you've got the values, and these are the different things we can manipulate of these parameters. So we can see it's in the path parameter here. We're going to send it along. We hit go, and we get a response. Now what we would want to do from there is we could view our response within Burp by going to the render tab, and it'll try and render it as best it can, kind of like a browser. So you can kind of view it inside of the tool, which is a really nice feature. Sometimes Burp's render is a little janky, as I would like to call it, and it doesn't give you the best quality. So what you could also do is, I'll do it in another example, you could send it to your browser, just a click basically copy and paste, and view it in your browser. So let's analyze cross-site scripting finding. Most assessments you'll find these, especially reflected, stored are more rare, reflected are very common. So we send this for a cross-site scripting reflected finding. There were 6 of them. Let's just send one of them to repeater by right-clicking on the resource, send to repeater, and voila, we have it here. We have the request, we have the raw. What we're going to want to do is we would send this, and we want to see the response in the browser. Because what it really is with cross-site scripting, you want to see if it's going to execute that payload in your browser and give you back an alert box or whatever it may be. So you're going to send this along, and this right here, this is actually a false positive. We're actually going to try and see if this gobbledygook is in the page, and it wasn't. But we can probably try and get this to work. Let's try another payload and see if we can get the push further. We send another one. We send a different cross-site scripting finding. We send it along. We have a request. We do the right-click, request in browser, copy, and then we basically paste it in our Firefox browser that we have talking with Burp. It goes and grabs it, and boom, we have a finding. It had the payload, and it was right here in the CMD parameter. It basically, we were able to escape out all of this, and we were able to embed our script alert XSS script. And we had it rendered. So we had reflected cross-site script. That's a legitimate finding, and the other one was a false positive. So that's just as good as should. So we want to think about how our input is being used. These are several different examples, and these are all different parameters you may see in the run line of just requests you make. So look for these redirects. Those could lead to open redirects. You could maybe have that go. I always like to do google.com. So I would change this to https google.com. Does it take me to Google? We got an open redirect. All right. File. Let's see if we can get it to load a file, maybe an LFI, an RFI, things of that nature. Name. If I change that name from Zach to Joe, does it give me information about a user possibly named Joe? Think about that. Search. We can do some search things. Basically, we can change and see across the application if we put in there. Maybe we could do some SQL injection. We could try that. We can do a single take just to see if we get back a different error message or a different response compared to that search. And then sometimes, this is sad, I've seen this parameter in assessments, SQL. And you can send raw SQL queries to the database from the app. Come on, people. Like, this is bad. So see how your input is being used and leveraged, and watch these parameters. Sometimes they're in the URI, sometimes they're in the body, and you have to look at them inside of Burp. So keep that in mind, whether it's a post or a GET request. All right. This is when I get a little crazy, right? So we're doing a repeater. And with repeater, we're simply just checking things manually, like little things here and there. We're trying some fuzzing attempts. Well, let's say we want to take it from just a small little manual test and just try a few things here and there and reduce false positives to automating our fuzzing. Let's just send it a list and see if we get back new vulnerabilities and findings. This is where I go into my Jack Nicholson mode, and I'm knocking on the app saying, here's Johnny, over and over and over again to find new faults. Fuzzing is the process, what it's called, basically. There's plenty of different lists out there, so a lot of people are like, well, I don't even know where to start. Like, where do I find these lists of cross-site scripting payloads? Where do I find SQL injection syntax? There's tons of different open source resources out there. FuzzDB has a lot, RAFList, SecList. SecList is one of my favorites. It's on GitHub. I'll cover it a little later. Trust me, I give it a whole slot. I love it. But basically, you want to start to understand how your input is being leveraged and how we can apply it to an automated manner and just fuzz parameter values, fuzz different things in our requests. And this is where we send things to Burp's intruder. We would find a request of interest where we found maybe a cross-site scripting finding, or we found something that we think is vulnerable, but we want to test it further, and we're going to send it to intruder because we want to automate this process rather than just send one payload at a time. We want to just run a list through it. So we're going to send to intruder, and you'll see here all these items are highlighted. Well, they're highlighted because those are areas of injection. These are input areas of injection where you can basically pass lists to them. And you'll see in a later example, we can change them, we can define them, we can do whatever we want. So it kind of auto-highlights you for Burp in Intruder for you what it thinks are injection points, which is nice.
So that's pause.
The pause. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So we got off to a great start right now, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a break. We're gonna spend the next 20 minutes getting some food, doing some networking, getting to know one another. But before we start, just one question. Who's out here for the first time? All right, that's great. So we're moving along. Let's spend these next 20 minutes. We'll start again at about 7:20 or so. All right, thank you.